everybody. This video introduces Love and Friendship, which is the film that we're watching for this week. Love and Friendship was released in 2016, which is only a couple years ago, so it's definitely the most recent of all the films that we're watching for this class. It's based on Lady Susan, as you've probably figured out. The title, Love and Friendship, is actually taken from another short Austen work that doesn't have anything to do with Lady Susan. And the film itself is set in the 1890s, which is about 20 years earlier than the settings of most of the other films we've watched. And this is the time period when the novella was actually written. So you'll notice some differences in the costuming and the hairstyles, which are, based on the slightly earlier period that happened at the very end of the 18th century. And as usual, I have a couple questions that I want you to think about as you are watching the film. The first question has to do with adaptation itself. So an epistolary novel like Lady Susan poses unique challenges for an adapter. No one wants to watch a movie where people are just reading and writing letters. So I want you to consider how the writers of Love and Friendship overcame this challenge. So what did they do to sort of make this a more kind of conventional movie with acting and dialogue, which we don't always necessarily see in the novel itself? The second question I want you to think about is the character of Lady Susan. So I want you to think about how the screenwriter presents the character of Lady Susan. Is she more sympathetic or less sympathetic than the Lady Susan of the novel? And what sort of makes her come off as either more or less sympathetic? And in this question, I'm specifically wanting you to think about the choices that the screenwriter made. So the choices in what sort of Lady Susan says to people, the dialogue that she has with people, and sort of things that she does on the screen. The other question, which is related to this, has to do with how the actor interprets Lady Susan. So how does Kate Beckinsale, who's the actor who portrays Lady Susan, interpret the character of Lady Susan? So does she, through her sort of acting choices, make Lady Susan seem witty? Does she make Lady Susan seem charming? Does it make sense to you from a reader's perspective or from a viewer's perspective that the male characters would be easily captivated by her? So what do you think of the actress's interpretation of this character and of the script that she's been given? And then I also want you to pay attention to some of the other characters. And the first one I want you to pay attention to is the character of Sir James Martin. In the novel, several characters suggest that Sir James Martin is a fool, but they don't really provide any details on what makes him seem foolish. So I want you to pay attention to how the writers and director develop the character of Sir James Martin. What are some of the specific examples of him behaving foolishly? And I'm thinking specifically of sort of the dinner scene where they talk about the peas, or the scene when he approaches Frederica as she's reading and gets confused about the difference between verse and poetry. These are sort of some of the examples that come to mind for me of ways and places in which the writers and the actor sort of fleshes out this character. And then I finally want you to think about some of the other more minor characters. So how are other minor characters like Reginald, Frederica, and Catherine Vernon portrayed in the film? Do they seem consistent with the characters in the novel, or do they depart from the characters in the novel in any ways? And then how so? And when you're thinking about this question, you can think about major things if you want, like character relationships or sort of overall personalities or attitudes. But you can also think about the ways in which the actors interpret these characters. So, for example, do you have a different reaction as a reader to these characters when you're watching the film than when you read the book? And if so, what do you think is causing that reaction? So do you find, say, Reginald or Frederica sort of more interesting or more fleshed out than you did when you read the book? And if so, why do you think that is? What sort of choices that the writers made, that the directors made, that the actors made cause you to have that different kind of reaction to the character? So I look forward to seeing what you guys think of the film in your discussion, and please let me know if you have any questions.